Many people feel behind in their life. It may be related to their profession, it may be related to their academics, it may be related to their romance. In many cases, people feel generally behind. And this can be a very crippling, this can be a very debilitating feeling because, hey, even if you catch up, now you're just equal to everybody else, right? But if we have the feeling that we are behind, we are most likely having that feeling because we want to be more ahead, right? So we did all this work to catch up, and now we potentially have to do double or triple the work to get to somewhere further. And now everybody gets overwhelmed, right? When you have a lot of things to do, when you have a lot of things on your mind, you get overwhelmed. So therefore, the more behind you feel, the more overwhelming you can feel, and the more overwhelming you can feel, the more paralyzed you can be. So, in the interest of solving for feeling behind today, right? It's important to recognize that everything is defined by context. So, for example, waking up at 6 o'clock, right? To someone, this is waking up early. But to another person, this is waking up late. Why? It's the same 6 o'clock, right? But depending on your schedule, if you have work at 9 a.m. and you work remotely from home, then you don't necessarily need to wake up at 6 a.m. If you are, if you need to be at work by 7, but then it takes about an hour to get to work, then you're late. So, what I'm trying to say is, this is just one simplistic example, right? But, uh, to a golf player, right? They are used to seeing balls of like this size. So when I ask them, hey, uh, what's the size of a bowling ball, right? Is it big or is it small? They are likely to say it's a big ball. But suppose I ask someone who regularly works with big balls, like beach balls, right? That you play with at the beach. And now go to these people and say, hey, when you think of a bowling ball, is it a big ball or a small ball? Then they're likely to say small ball. Why? Because in their head, the definition of a ball is something bigger than a bowling ball. But to a golfer, the definition of a ball is something that's small, right? Like in the real, I mean, not small in the absolute sense. They are thinking of balls that are in the golf ball size. So, like this, depending on how you have lived life, you can have different perspective about things, right? But the important thing to note here is bigness of something, smallness of something, doesn't really stand on its own. You always need a point of comparison in order to make a relative judgment, right? So, then why do so many people feel like they are behind? They feel like they are behind because, just like the golf ball example, right? Just like the beach ball example, it's what you are used to perceiving yourself as. So, because your sight is fixed onto the people who seemingly have more than you, right? So these people are ahead of you. So because you are always looking at these people, you always have to feel behind. So it's an unconscious way of looking at yourself thing. But there's additional one point. Another important point here is the existence of a value system. Because how can you know who is ahead of you? How can you know who is behind you without a value system? So it's the interplay of these two factors that make you feel behind. You have a strong value system that ranks things in a hierarchy, and you are always looking at the people who are relatively ahead of you. So, is this a problem? Is this a reason to suffer? Well, not really. You have a value system and you are looking at people who are ahead of you. So of course you will feel blind. Not blind. Of course you will feel behind. But that's not a reason to suffer, right? Then where does the suffering come from? I train jiu-jitsu, right? And there are many athletes who are, performing way better than me. There are people who started jiu-jitsu later than me, but then they're higher rank than I am because they train a lot more than I do, right? But I'm okay with that. But not a lot of other people are, right? So, it's not the ahead or the behind thing that brings us suffering. What brings us suffering is our dissatisfaction with where we are. As long as we are unhappy about where we are, that is what brings us suffering. So somebody ahead of you, right, is having a good time. But that's not really a reason for you to suffer, right? Also, you can be happy and also pursue some other things, right? So I happily train jiu-jitsu, but I get tapped out a lot. But I keep going because I want to be better, but I don't have a problem with my current skill level. So just like that, if I'm happy now with where I am, I don't suffer, regardless of my positioning in the value system. But most of the times, we suffer because we are not happy with where we are. So the easy solution is to be happy with where we are. But you will say, hey, that's easier said than done, right? But the thing is, if you believe that, there is usually a good reason in your life for believing in that manner. So, you can pick your own direction, right? You can continue exploring why you are unhappy, why it is so important to be in that value system. Or you can continue to participate in the value system and hey, there's no problem with suffering inherently, right? If you're suffering, then it's only a problem if you want to stop suffering. And I happen to want to stop suffering, therefore I, studied all of this and started applying it to my life. And maybe this insight is enough for you to just drop one thing. But hey, your life is up to you, regardless of what I tell you, and the knowledge that I imparted upon you today. I hope it helps you break away from your suffering.